Well, it is the first meeting of the new year. I'm going to try to put some words up here. I mean, I think the things I've got picked, everybody should know these words anyway, but if you don't, okay, did it pop up?
Yes.
Wonderful. So I picked two songs. It's the first meeting of the year, and it seemed to me we had to do Old Lang Syne since we couldn't have real New Year's Eve parties. At least we can do the first verse. I was tempted to pull out the second verse, but I said that much Lowland Scots this early in the year with no whiskey would just be too much. So we'll do the first, and then after that, I would like for us to do the Woody Guthrie's patriotic song, This Land is Our Land. So let's start with Bobby Burns and Old Lang Syne. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days of old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne. Now to Woody Guthrie. This land is your land, and this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway, saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. All right, President Jim, back to you.
Thank you, John. We really appreciate that. And now, if you can all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned?
And will it be fun?
Thank you, Bob Healy, on cue. Thank you very much. And now Joe New will lead us in an invocation.
Thank you. Because our speaker today is in the profession of telling us when water is going to fall and when water is going to rise, I thought these words by Margaret Atwood would be appropriate. Water does not resist, water flows. When you plunge your hand into it, all you feel is a caress. Water is not a solid wall, it will not stop you. But water always goes where it wants to go, and nothing in the end can stand against it. Water is patient. Dripping water wears away stone. Remember, my friend, remember you're a half water. If you can't go through an obstacle, go around it. Water does. And so let's pray that this year we'll have the blessing of having enough water, no droughts, but not too much water, no flooding. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Joe. And now a visitation report from our very own Joe Massey.
Not much to report. I haven't heard from anybody over the holidays, so I want to open the floor in case somebody can share with us some news that we might need to hear.
Anyone? Okay, Michael.
I had COVID and it sucked.
Well, how are you feeling now, Mike?
Back to work yesterday, so good.
Okay. Well, we're glad you're back at it.
Really glad to see you.
Thank you.
Anyone else know of anyone who we might want to get in touch with or may need some assistance from us? All right. Moving right along, introduction of guests. I'm looking around. I know we have actually one of our prospective new members, Stan, is with us today. And I've already prepped Stan. There's going to be a point at which we're going to have to ask him to leave the meeting because we're going to be voting on him, but told him he can leave for about 5 minutes and come right back because it should not take long to take care of that. I'm looking around to see if there's any other guests. I don't see any, but welcome, Stan. Thank you very much for joining us again. And I suspect that at our next meeting, you will be one of us. So appreciate that.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Okay. Our school of the week is Mary Calcott Elementary School. And our rotation scribe for today is Diana Starkey. So, feel free to speak loudly and clearly when you're called upon or have something to add. And also feel free to utilize the chat box. I will tell you that a lot of the information in the chat box does get saved. So it's something that we could certainly go back to. And I see that our guest speaker, Jeff, has arrived. Jeff, welcome to the club.
Thank you.
Okay. We will let you know when we're ready for you.
Yeah.
So it is the first our first meeting in January, and Happy New Year to all. I hope everyone had a restful, if not less than exciting, holiday season. I mean, it was certainly different for lots of families, and I know our family was no different. We do have, in keeping with our tradition, we do have some birthdays to announce that are being celebrated by our members. Collins Gooch on January 2nd, Ann Sullivan on January 3rd, Steve Kirkland on the 8th of January, Greg Bachheim on the 9th of January, Ann Baldwin on the 18th, and Paul Sykes on the 19th. John, if you could lead us in a little rendition of Happy Birthday to our Rotarians.
Absolutely, it'd be a delight. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Rotarians. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And as is our tradition, all of our January birthdays are hereby fined. You have the choice of either contributing $5 to Norfolk Rotary Charities, or if you're feeling particularly generous, feel free to give us $1 for each year of your time on this earth. So we would appreciate either one of those. We also have a couple of wedding anniversaries. We have Bob Ash and Mary Lewis celebrating 52 years on January 8th. And we have Bob and Lush Healy celebrating 47 years on January 19th. So congratulations to our Bobs in the club and their better halves. Do want to remind everyone that you can use Venmo to make your contributions to Norfolk Rotary Charities. And I believe somebody just put up in the chat room or the chat box. You know what? Let me just put it up there real quick. It's at Norfolk Rotary. It's at Norfolk Rotary dash charities. But let me just put that there for a second. Okay, so that there is, if you want to use Venmo to pay. We also have some Rotary anniversaries to let everyone know about. Bob Ash is celebrating 38 years this month as a Rotarian. Jim Baker is celebrating 44 years as a Rotarian. Bill Jonak is celebrating 71 years as a Rotarian. He joined Rotary back in 1950. Chick Robeson is celebrating 45 years this month. Chip Vogan is celebrating 44 years. Joe Massey is celebrating 23 years. Connor Pritchard is celebrating 2 years. Marcia Constant is celebrating 1 year. Dalton Dunbar is celebrating 12 years. Dave Duncan is celebrating 1 year with our club. Jack Frost is celebrating 2 years, and Patricia Plusinski is celebrating 2 years. Patricia is in the Satellite Club. So once again, I congratulate all of our Rotarians on their anniversary date. Now I want to turn the program over to Sigrid Whitaker, who's our foundation chair, and she has some wonderful news to share about our club's generosity and particularly some folks who are particularly generous. Sigrid.
Thank you, President Jim. I do indeed have great news for the club. As you all remember, we ran a special on the Rotary Day of Giving, and because of that, 9 of our members have either become a new Paul Harris Fellow or increased their Paul Harris Fellow pin by another number. So starting off with our newest Paul Harris Fellow, it is our also new member, relatively new member, Chris Bugg. And thank you, Chris, so much for your generosity and congratulations on becoming a Paul Harris Fellow. That is terrific. Those who have increased their Paul Harris Fellows include John Cameron with Paul Harris Fellow +1, Collins Gooch, Paul Harris Fellow +4, Alan Nelson, Paul Harris Fellow +3, Fred Walker, who is a honorary member, is now a Paul Harris Fellow +2, George Campo is Paul Harris Fellow +5, Joey Rothgary is Paul Harris Fellow +4, Chick Robeson is Paul Harris Fellow +3, and last but not least, Paul Harris Fellow +8 is Bill Clendenin. We could not come anywhere close to doing what we do in the community and Rotary International in the world without your generosity. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you all, and that is just a wonderful testament to the wonderful people in the Rotary Club of Norfolk. So thank you all very much. Before we move on, let's go to some fines and happy bucks. Who has some wonderful news, good news they'd like to share with the club? Sigrid.
I do. My beloved Tar Heels went to their first major bowl in 70 years, and that was the Orange Bowl. And even though they lost, I'm very, very proud of them. And I thought they were going to win the game as they were leading in the fourth quarter about midway through. So even though we lost, I felt like it was a terrific showing, particularly since 3 of the major starters who were receivers chose to opt out because they're going on to the pros. So I'm very happy for my Tar Heels.
Jim.
Yes, Jim Sell.
I will leave the fine up to our Honorable President, Jim Kitts. I am happy to announce that West Virginia University defeated Army over the weekend in the famously inconsequential bowl. And whatever you decide is appropriate, I will be happy to pay.
So I think if you're willing to pay $10, I will match you on that because Amen. It was incredibly inconsequential. Bob Healy has some news.
Let me get unmuted. Yes, well, I'll be sending a check in for my anniversary, And I'll add to that some bucks. I, since I work at Harbor's Edge with seniors, was lucky enough to get my first vaccine shot yesterday. And I'm happy about that.
I bet you are. Good for you, Bob. Good for you. Let's see, who else do we have here? Chris Bug.
Jim, refresh my memory. I mean, you forgot to do fines and happy bucks last meeting, so that's probably a fine. But I think I lost a bet. I'll go ahead and give you the opportunity to rub that in and tell me how much I owe.
Okay. How about we go with the combined score of that game? What Chris is referring to is the Army-Navy game, in which Army won and then went on the next week to defeat Air Force, also to bring home the Commanders-in-Chief trophy. So Chris, I will let
Honestly,
you.
Wasn't it $100? I thought it was $100. You let me get off with the combined score.
Okay. Well, that is Jim O'Brien, and my bet is that. So
okay, that's it. All
okay,
right.
so that's it. That is it. And I appreciate you bringing that up. Bob Healy I'm assuming your hand is still raised, but it hasn't gone back down. I have a fine for our membership director. Joe Massey, you've been all over the news, all over the newspapers, and all over billboards. So how about telling us what I'm referring to?
Well, as to the newspaper, it was a good example of a bad news day. It was Saturday. It was above the banner. It's a story about the Narrow Theater trying to raise funds by renting out its marquee. And some friends and family got wind of that and put up a statement that told the world that I had turned 70. So Jim, I'll send you $70.
Well, thank you, Joe. That is very kind of you, and we'll go for a wonderful cause. Anyone else with some happy bucks or good news they'd like to share?
Jim?
Yes.
This is Lorna.
Hey, Lorna.
I'm going to give some happy bucks because I managed to go through 8 flights and get back to Canada, quarantine there for 14 days, come back here, quarantine again, and now I'm still in quarantine, I guess, because I can't get out. But I just want to have happy bucks for all the Rotarians that sent me messages, gave me calls, sent me cards. You know, it really helps because I didn't feel alone. So thank you very much. And I've got some happy bucks for that.
Thank you, Lorna. Appreciate that, and hope you and your sister's family are doing as well as they can. Anyone else? All right. Well, let's move right along. I do want to let everyone know that invoices went out on the 1st of January, and you can pay them either by sending in a check, or there is Acceptiva that you can use also. They can, if you want to avoid the fee that Acceptiva charges, you can actually Venmo the money in. The Venmo account is at Rotary Club of Norfolk. I'll put that up on the chat in a couple of minutes. So that is probably the simplest way to do it. But I just want to make sure you know that they're out, and would appreciate everyone's prompt remittance of that money. Walt, you have a service project for us coming up. Walt, you're muted.
Okay, that's better.
Yeah.
Yes, on Saturday, in just a few days, we have a food bank opportunity. I'm not sure what the task is, but as usual, we'll probably be making boxes of food either for the elderly or school children We have 5 people signed up. I kind of committed the club to 10 people, and that is from 8 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock Saturday morning. That's all we have at this point, Jim.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And again, we've had a nice partnership with the food bank, and highly encourage you to consider joining the club and doing some good work on Saturday morning. Let's see what else we have here. Invoices. Stan, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave for, if you can give us like 5 minutes and come on back, that would be great. We're going to be voting on 2 prospective members. And as we've done in the past, what I will be doing is just putting up a poll, and it's basically a yes or no. And we have 2 members. One is Stan Tuberville, and the other is Jennifer Dilworth. And you received their application as it was attached to the invite for this meeting, so you've had a chance to take a look at it. So I'm just going to pop up here and let me do Jennifer. I'm going to launch this poll, and it is simply, are you in favor of admitting Jennifer Dilworth as a member of our club? All right, give it 10 more seconds. All right, well, thank you. Here's the results. She was overwhelmingly approved. I appreciate that. And now let me go to the next one. And this is for Stan. And again, it's the same question and procedure. All right, we'll give it about 10 more seconds.
Hello.
Hey, Bill.
How are you?
Good, good. All right, thank you very much. And I'll just share the results of that vote. Both folks were unanimous, which is wonderful. And I will, myself and Joe Massey will be in touch with them to make arrangements for their induction as soon as possible.
Great.
So thank you very much for your input on that. It's nice to know that even during these interesting times, the club has net added new people, which is wonderful. So now going to turn the program over to our Vice President in charge of programs, Lori Harrison. Lori, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm going to go back a little bit and give heavy bucks for Jeff being our speaker today, because I'm excited that he's here, and I've actually known Jeff and his wife and all of his kids for a very long time. So I'm looking forward to having him here. But today I'm introducing Sharon Latterberg as our Rotarian of the Day. And Sharon has been a Rotarian for 14 years, which I did not know. She has wonderful memories of being in our club, sorting food at the food bank and clothes at Mojo's. And her favorite part is the assigned tables, because eventually we get to know each other through that system. And her fun fact is that she says she's an open book, so I guess it's all fair to ask her anything. But that Jeff Lawson's sister-in-law, Dana, used to work for her when she owned the zoo on Colley Avenue. Didn't know that either. So thank you, Sharon, for introducing Jeff today.
That was my pleasure. I'm introducing Jeff Lawson, who is the chief meteorologist who never planned to be on television. He knew he'd work in science, but in high school, the question of the lover of math and science, which would be his area of study. Jeff was torn between becoming a meteorologist or a chemical engineer. Since no school in Virginia had meteorology as a major, he decided to apply to the top school in the country for forecasting. And if Penn State accepted him, then he'd go there. If the university turned him down, he planned to attend Virginia Tech and major in chemical engineering. Fortunately for 13 News Now, Jeff headed north to Pennsylvania. While he attended Penn State, he worked for the campus weather service, providing forecasts for radio stations throughout Pennsylvania. One of his most memorable forecasts came when emergency planners who were handling the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant meltdown called and asked which areas to evacuate because of the radiation fallout. I'm certainly glad I wasn't there for you to call me. Jeff spent summers and Christmas breaks working for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, which is the umbrella organization for the National Weather Service. While he was there, he worked with Dr. Vern Dvorak to develop methods of estimating the strength of tropical systems from satellite pictures. Those methods still are used exclusively by the National Hurricane Center to estimate how strong tropical systems are when they are too far away to be accessed by a Hurricane Hunter aircraft or are in between recon flights. After graduation, Jeff went to work for AccuWeather, where his job was to call weathercasters who were not meteorologists and tell them what to say on television that night. He also did radio forecasts for other clients such as power companies, ski resorts, and municipalities. Jeff left AccuWeather to work for a company called Weather Center, where he did the same type of forecasting for clients, including Exxon's offshore oil rigs, the Boston Globe, and radio stations across North America. As Jeff became less shy, which I cannot imagine.
Oh, trust me.
Oh, no. And realized he liked explaining science to people, he decided to give television a try. Jeff's first TV job was WWBT TV 12 in Richmond. He stayed there for 4 years doing weekend weather before moving to WTTG, the Fox station in Washington, D.C., as weekend meteorologist. While in Washington, he met his future wife, who grew up in Virginia Beach. She convinced him to apply to 13 News Now, where he has been the chief meteorologist for 29 years. When you combine his time doing radio in the market, 2WD was one of his clients before he got into TV, with his TV time, Jeff has been forecasting continuously for Hampton Roads for more than 39 years, longer than any meteorologist in the history of the area. Jeff is proud to say he does all his own forecasting, never looking at another person's forecast. Because of that, he believes that the 13 News Now audience gets forecasts that are different and more accurate than those from other stations, where people have little or no training in meteorology and rely primarily on the National Weather Service to tell them what to say. As we continue to see technology advance at a rapid rate and more automation come into play with things like weather apps that come strictly from the computer models, Jeff and his team promise to use their experience, schooling, and training to give audience members forecasts that are the most accurate available. Jeff has been married for nearly 30 years to the world's greatest woman. They have 3 children and a cat. In his spare time, Jeff likes to work out by hiking and cycling. You can email Jeff as well as follow him on Facebook and Twitter. I introduce Jeff Lawson.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sharon. You covered some of what I was going to cover, but I'll expound on it a little more. Some of what you just said is actually a little behind the times. First of all, I've now been married over 30 years. My anniversary, you guys were talking about anniversaries. Mine was just last week. I had my 30th anniversary. My lovely wife is right downstairs. So Lori will attest that I married up in life, and very excited. Also, you said 29 years. Well, I've now been at the station. This is my 31st year. So I'm going to have to get on the marketing department to update that little bio that they had on there. As you mentioned, well, actually, you didn't mention, I grew up in Virginia. You probably inferred that from the fact that I said because nobody in Virginia had meteorology, that I had to go off to Penn State. And actually, since I went, UVA sort of got a program. They have a climatology program. So now some meteorologists are coming out of UVA. Typically not really at TV types. It's more the research and the climatology end of things. But very, very excited about Virginia Tech now has a program. That's only, I don't know, I'm off on my years always. I would guess 4 to 5 years old, so it's probably a few years more than that. But now Virginia Tech has a program, so kids like me can go to school in state. So I ended up going to Penn State. I think most people would agree it's the best meteorology school in the country. Evan Stewart grew up around here in Chesapeake. He had to go off to NC State to go to school. So there weren't a lot of choices or any choices for those of us that grew up in state. Now, again, there are. So that's something very exciting. As you mentioned, I went to AccuWeather first. I didn't want to be on TV. I just wanted to do forecasting. So that's what I started out doing. 2WD was one of my first clients back in 1980 when I graduated. So I started doing 2WD 40 years ago. Actually, I started at AccuWeather January 2nd of 1981. So I started doing 2WD 40 years and 2 days ago, something like that. Eventually decided I wasn't all that shy anymore. I'd try TV. So as you mentioned, I went to Richmond, then went to DC, thought I would stay there forever since I'm from Northern Virginia. Met my wife, who's from Virginia Beach. She talked me into moving down here, and the rest is history. I love this area. When I retire, I'm just going to stay right here and find something else to do because I just love this area so much. This is the first Zoom type of these things that I've ever done, so this is a little bit new to me. I actually sort of do a lot of I mainly do school kids. So if I sit there and start saying, now you all understand, you blah, blah. If I start talking down to you, so to speak, I'm not really. It's just sort of ingrained from all those 40 some years now of doing school talks. I also, as I mentioned, sort of do interactive. I can show different things, pass them around. I know how to do screen share. If I've got something saved, I'm not positive I know how to do it, just bring it up a web page. So I'm going to try to do a little of that still and explain some stuff. I'm going to try to leave time for, questions, whatever it's on. I'll try to cover some of the basics. Meteorology is first of all, meteorology is a very broad field. I would say out of 40 people that were in my meteorology class cohort at Penn State, I'll bet you there's not 5 of us that are in TV. Fair number of people went into the military and did forecasting. There's some people that are in research, everything from studying the ozone hole to climate change to modeling of our weather computers. I'm going to try to show you a couple of those weather computers when you always hear us saying, well, this model's calling for that and that model's calling for that, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to try to show you some of that. Talk a little bit about forecasting. Forecasting is part art and part science and part experience. We have the background in physics and math, because that's all the atmosphere is. It's really just a series of waves, you know, atmospheric waves of pressure, disturbances of vorticity that spin everything up. There are a lot of different variables. And one of the things that's happened over the last 40 years of my career is that computer forecasting has gotten a lot better. It used to be 70%, let's say, experience and 30% relying on the computers, if that. Nowadays, the computers do such a good job that there are fewer times each year that you can really delineate and differentiate yourself compared to the computers. They've gotten so much better. But that brings up another point about the weather apps. The weather apps, there's no way that I can put in a forecast, a 7-day, or in general for Hampton Roads. But the forecast is going to be very different. Even yesterday, no, day before yesterday, when we were 68 or whatever we were, it was like 50 all day in Newport News and 75 in like Elizabeth City. So to put that in a forecast, you don't want somebody in Elizabeth City who's a 13 News viewer to click on it and read that it's going to be 60. You don't want somebody in Newport News to read that because they're off the other direction. So I'm not a huge fan of it, but what most weather apps now do is try to locate you exactly where you are and then give you a forecast based just on one computer model. Typically, that's the American computer model called the GFS. And the nickname for that in the weather community is good for blank. I'll let you fill in what the S is in blank because it's just not terribly accurate, but it's the only one we got. So that's why I hate the fact that it looks like it's my forecast and even now we have on that weather app, they can't get the coding right. So it'll say like a 1% chance of rain when it means 10. And when it's a 50% chance, it says 5. It's leaving the zeros off. And a lot of other weather apps are like that. So I get complaints all the time. You had a 5% chance of rain today. You're awful. And it's like, no, we had a 70%. The model had a 50% and it showed it as 5%. So that's why we really aren't huge fans of weather apps, to be honest with you. At least in terms of the forecasting, I will say that like our forecast, the radar is great on our weather app. You can bring up our actual forecast on it, which is great because then you get the real forecast by clicking on it, not just reading the hour by hour or whatever, but actually bringing up the 7-day or bringing up the written part of the forecast. It's even good, it's really good for short term. If you pull up the radar and have it on past and you get the last hour, 2 hours, whatever it is, you can then click on future and it does a really good job of giving you the radar over the next hour or 2 hours. So in some ways, it's really good and really valuable. In other ways, it's not so valuable. So that's just sort of an aside on weather modeling and computers in general. The other thing that I like to get into, because when I first started, I would go out and I mentioned how at AccuWeather, I would call up weather people and tell them what to say. Didn't call meteorologists. I called weather people and would tell them what to say. And for years and years, I don't know Don Slater, for example, personally. I've met him a couple times. Here, he's a super nice guy. He's always been very nice to me, but he's not a meteorologist. And for the first 10 or 15 years I was here, I would tell people, you have meteorologists that studied it in school like I did, took all the math, took all the physics. And then a lot of TV people are theater majors, for example. Or one of the other people in town's a history major with a journalism minor. They're not meteorologists. And I would say, and I applaud Don Slater, for example. He doesn't try to lie to people, doesn't say he's a meteorologist. Well, about 15 years ago, that stopped. And now he's chief meteorologist Don Slater because they knew we were outdoing them in terms of viewership for weather events. So that's something that still I really like to emphasize to people is not everybody you see on TV is a meteorologist. Even people that call themselves aren't meteorologists. So you really have to be careful of where you get your information. And, you know, we've been rated the most accurate in the 10 years that there's been an independent agency that keeps track of forecasts and verifies them. Every single year, we've been voted the most accurate in Hampton Roads. And that's something we're very proud of. And it's because we feel we're all meteorologists. And not just meteorologists, but certified meteorologists. The American Meteorological Society has a certification program. It started out like I got my radio certification back when I was doing radio in 1980, 81, 82. Then when I got into TV in Richmond in 83, I got a TV certification. But even then, they would let anybody who either had a degree or had been doing TV for 5 years and didn't have a degree, they were like, yeah, you probably know enough. We'll give you a certification. So I got that one. Well, over time, they were like, you know, we need to differentiate who the people are that really know what they're talking about. So let's make them make a test. And if it sounds from what I'm saying, like I think only degreed meteorologists should be on TV, that's not totally true. I stood up at a couple of weather conferences, including a hurricane conference. And I said, one of the guys I worked with at Weather Center, who's now in TV in Syracuse, does not have a degree, but he knows as much about weather as almost anybody I know. He went to the National Weather Service every day from like age 12 through the end of his college. He's taken almost all the courses to be a meteorologist. I said, there ought to be a way to test people like that. And if you pass the test, then you can call yourself a meteorologist. Well, that's what they eventually did. And I like that plan. So now there's a pretty comprehensive test that we all take to get what's called our CBM, Certified Broadcast Meteorologist. And there are only, I think only 5 or 6 of us in this market that have that. 5 of them are at our station. Every single one of us, other than Peyton, who's too new to have it, have the Certified Broadcast Meteorologist designation. And that's something we're very proud of. Going back to the different types of forecasting, there are a lot of different things that we use to make a forecast. I'm going to see if I can share a screen here. I don't want a whiteboard. Actually, I'm going to have to, I think, wait a minute, screen. If I bring up a different screen, maybe? You have to forgive me for a second. Let me see if I can bring this up, because a lot of people find this interesting when we show it to them. Share screen. Oh,
there should be a green share screen box.
Yeah, I did that,
okay.
But then it's like asking if it's something I want off Google Drive or, oh, portion of the screen. Oh, dagnabbit, I can't seem to figure it. I know I could save it, but oh well, it's basic. Actually, wait a minute, I know what I can do. This will be much easier. People always ask me, what do you use for your forecasting? And I tell them, well, if I had to pick one single thing to look at every day, it would be this. And I'm going to show it to you right now in a, can you see how this is just a block of numbers all in a row? And on the one side, it starts at 00, then it says 06, 12, 18, 24, etc. That's the time. Then the next row is, and this looks like it's backwards, so you're going to have to read right from left on this one. But anyway, all those numbers there are literally the first line was the hours, and that's from Greenwich Mean Time. The next one's the precipitation. The next one's the relative humidity, low, medium, and high. Then if the air's lifting or not, then the pressure, and all these are in code as well. So we had to learn how to read all these codes at school. And then there's the thickness, and then and I tell new people that come out all the time, like the last one that you can see, the T1, T3, T5, see those? Okay, those are the temperatures at low level, medium level, and upper level, and they're in Celsius. And if they're below 0 Celsius would be like a 94, let's say, would be -6, because you subtract from 100. Again, it's a code. But anyway, my point was going to be, what computer models don't show you is, let's say there's a storm coming up and you're trying to decide if it's rain or it's snow, or sleet for that matter. Well, very different temperature profile in the atmosphere. If it starts out as snow and it encounters a warm layer partway down, it melts. Then it encounters cold again. You can't go from rain to snow. So it just freezes, which is what sleet is. So that kind of helps me find the warm levels of the atmosphere and determine, oh, this isn't going to be snow. I think it's going to melt a little bit at 5,000 to 6,000 feet and then refreeze. Or is the warm layer at 2,000 feet and it stays snow the whole way, and then it's 35 degrees, so it suddenly turns to rain. That kind of forecast that I just showed you in raw sort of data coming from the computer is where I think real meteorologists can make a difference over the models and over people that don't understand the science behind it and that kind of thing, et cetera. So that's what typically I almost totally use to make my forecast. I'll augment it with some of the regular radar screens that you see, of course. Observations play a big part. There's a lot that goes into forecasting, as does experience. Some of the cases in the past that I've had that I'm really proud of is, there'd be a snowstorm that was called for, and I again would see that it was going to be sleet, and I'd say, no, we're gonna knock amounts down by half over what everybody else says, because I think there'll be some sleet. Or one of the ones I remember the most was from about 15 years ago. Everybody was saying rain and like 33 or 34 degrees. And I said, I think the upper air, it's going to come down hard enough that it's going to pull the cold air down, and that will create enough for it to be snow. And everybody else was calling for rain. We called for like 4 to 6 inches of snow, and we got that. And we're proud. So we're proud of things like that when it happens. The other thing that I think really comes to the forefront is during severe weather, whether it's hurricanes. I mentioned I work for they still to this day, and you can go to it. If you go to NHC, National Hurricane Center, nhc.gov, you will get the National Weather Service page that's just for hurricanes. Well, when you bring that up, even lay people nowadays non-meteorologists can click on like discussion, and you'll be able to read their internal discussion and what they're thinking about a storm. So if you're seeing one thing on TV, you might, if you're into weather, or even if you're not, and you just want to see, I wonder what they're saying, the experts, click on discussion, and you'll see where it'll say, the storm, we really think it might intensify more than we're saying right now, but we don't want to go out on a limb and say that yet. You can read a lot of stuff about that in the NOAA page. Well, you'll read quite often, the Dvorak scale is showing it as a Cat 1, and we think, it's probably going to be a Cat 2. Well, that Dvorak scale, I helped develop with Dr. Dvorak. Actually, I dated his daughter Holly briefly as well. So anyway, Dr. Dvorak developed that scale, and I was one of the people that helped when I was at Penn State. So we really feel like we know hurricanes the best. The other difference that comes up a lot is in analysis during tornadoes. Like I was supposed to be off Christmas Eve. I worked Christmas Eve because of the tornado threat. And at one point we were on the air, and when we look at a potential tornado, the one thing you get with our station that you will not get at the others, especially from the non-meteorologists, there are a couple of other meteorologists at both the other stations, but not as their main people. When they show a potential tornadic storm, they're like, well, the Weather Service says this is a tornado and here's why. Well, they don't know enough to look at that and go, well, actually, I don't think that is a tornado. Or in the case just Christmas Eve, I was on at 11:30 to 12 to 12:30 to 1 to 1:30, pointing out which ones I thought were tornadoes and which ones I knew were tornadoes. And it turned the Suffolk one, for example, I was like, this is a tornado. Take cover now, people, et cetera, et cetera. That turned out to be a tornado. I knew it was just because I had the training to look at what the correlation coefficient was and detect a debris ball and stuff. So again, that's one way that we really think we differentiate ourselves compared to others. I know I got to leave some time for questions, so I always get questions, and I'll throw this out there very quickly. People ask me all the time about climate change, and there's no doubt the climate is changing. Some of you, I guarantee, don't believe that it's man-made. Well, and they say, well, it's over the course of history, every 10,000 years or whatever, there's an ice age or there's a hot spell, et cetera, et cetera. You don't know that it's not caused by that. We know what caused those in the past. The path around the sun of ours, for example, changes in declination. We get closer to the sun every 100,000 years, but or whatever. I'm not into all the astronomy, but there are certain cycles that we go through that we can say, yeah, we did get a warm up back in, 12,000 years ago through 15,000 years ago or whatever. But that matches up with how we should have been warmer astronomically. So anyway, I'm a firm believer, as are most meteorologists, that climate change is occurring and that it is being caused by man-made effects. Something we don't go into a whole lot on TV, but I know I've got to leave some time for questions anyway, so that might have opened up a couple. So anybody have any questions?
I'll speak up here, Jeff. I've been sitting on the iPad looking to how to go to 13 News and go direct to the weather, and I can't find a link. Can you point me there?
Yeah, 13, if you bring up 13newsnow.com, in the upper corner, there should be like a sun and a temperature. Upper right-hand corner. Let me pull it up.
Oh, right-hand corner.
Yeah, let me see. Let me bring it up here. WEEC. Very, very upper right-hand corner next to the, well, now it's below the ad for kitchen remodeling, but where you see news, weather, sports, connect, watch, you can either click on weather, or you can just go all the way over to the right where the temperature is and click on the temperature thing, and it'll give you the forecast as well. That one I think is the automated one. So just clicking on weather, says 13 News Now, then news, then weather, then sports, connect, etc. If you just hover over weather and go down to forecast, that opens up the forecast. The 7-day comes up, and then there's a written thing below it that shows what our current forecast.
I got it now. Thank you. Thanks.
Now I've got it playing an ad. Let me stop that.
Could I ask a question? This is Bob Ash.
Certainly.
Jeff, have you interacted at all with the Hampton University Center for Atmospheric Science and Education?
Not really, no. They reached out one point and asked if we would be willing to do stuff with them, and we said absolutely, and we never heard from them again.
Well, I might be able to help you on that. But one of the things that I'd like you to maybe respond to, they used the actual NOAA weather data to take a look at how the European weather model and the GFS model compared on the hurricane that came ashore, was that 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And they first of all, they said, and you can either agree or disagree, that both simulation programs use the same weather data files, except the European file actually incorporates the weather coming from the Pacific, whereas the GFS does not. And they said that that was the reason that the European forecasting was a better correlation with the actual hurricane. Do you have an opinion on that?
I don't believe that's true. The biggest difference, as I understand it, again, I'm not totally into modeling, I just know which ones I like better and in which situations. The biggest difference, as I understand it, is that the European model has a lot higher processing capability. They got, ours, we paid whatever, let's pick a number, $2 billion for our, weather computers. Well, they got Britain and France and Germany to all commit that kind of money. And so they have a much more massive supercomputer that they, instead of we just upped it to 13 layers of the atmosphere, I want to say, theirs does 20 or whatever. Our model is a 12 kilometer, I want to say, resolution, meaning that it's sort of like regular definition TV versus high definition versus ultra high definition. If there's a dot on your screen that's smaller than whatever microns, it's not going to show up. Well, it's the same thing with the weather data. If you have a big thunderstorm, but it's less than 12 kilometers large, the computer doesn't see it. It has to be bigger than 12 kilometers. So the finer the resolution, the better the picture, just like in TV. And they have higher resolution than we do. Somebody just asked, I didn't catch the name, if one of the big reasons for improvement over the years is data collection. And that is 100% absolutely true. When I was first coming up and working, as I said, with Dr. Dvorak, one of the things that I did was use satellites to determine what the winds were over various areas where we didn't have data. So we used Lake Titicaca down in South America, and we would focus on Lake Titicaca because we knew what that elevation was. And we would then correspond the infrared temperature at that elevation. And then that's sort of how we zeroed all our data. And then we would go and we'd find over the Atlantic, the Atlantic, the Pacific, and we'd take 4 hours, let's say, and go, okay, here's an area of cloudiness that's there, and then it's there. If it was a wide front, you couldn't really tell what part of the front, whether it was moving east or east-northeast, but you would find like individual clouds and track them that stayed like one consistent blob, and you'd be like, okay, it moved 400 miles in 4 hours. Here's the exact heading, and we would get the data that way. Well, nowadays the airplanes, bring us pressure and wind speed and everything. So that's the biggest reason, I think, that and better computing power. Next.
Yeah, Jeff, I got to thank you because of your accuracy, I've gotten out a lot of yard work. Appreciate that. My planning on a Saturday and Sunday. So from the television point of view, how do you produce the shows? You guys are on for basically 12 hours. So how do you have two meteorologists on at the same time?
It depends on the day and the show. In the past, for a long time now, for many years, I was the only one on in the evenings. And then as we got, but we only had, when I got here, we did a 5 and a 6. Then we put like Entertainment Tonight on at 5 or something. We did a 5:30 and a 6. Well, then we went to a 5:30 and 6. And then 10 years ago or whatever, we went to a 4:35, 5:36, of course, an 11. And at one point we had a 10 and a 10:30 when we were on LNC. So when we went to the 4 o'clock to 6:30 block, I said, I need help in the evenings. So that's when we moved Evan, who had done weekends for 15, 20 years or whatever. We moved Evan Stewart to weather producing. So he would be in there. He wasn't on TV for a while, but he would help me draw up the maps and whatever. And I'd make the forecast up. Then he would help me make the maps. And then I would do all the on-air presentation. Eventually, it's a long story, but when Craig left the morning show, Tim filled in or took his job. Craig didn't like where he went. He wanted to come back. We certainly weren't going to let anybody go to bring Craig back. So we had to find spots for everybody. You know, they knew that now I was in my 60s, I'm not going to be around forever. So I said, well, I'll do fewer shows. Let Evan do the 4 o'clock. I mean, Tim do the 4 o'clock, Evan do the 5 o'clock. I'll do the 6 and the 11, sort of ease back a little. So on a normal day now, there are 3 of us in the afternoon. I do all the forecasting. I consult with them, obviously. If they see something they don't like, they'll try to convince me otherwise. And so we'll collaborate, do the forecast, and then they make up their own maps pretty much. Although a lot of them are automated. It's just a board that says mostly sunny or whatever, or showing which computer model. The other cool thing we can do now is we can take, and this is something to differentiate. All 3 of the main stations now, we use the same weather model. But I'll look at that model and I'll be like, it's way wrong already. The very initialization shows no rain and it's raining, or it's 80 miles too far east or whatever. So I can now manually adjust the model, and it's the same model they're showing, but I've adjusted it west 80 miles or made it 2 hours faster or increased the intensity of precipitation by 50%. So anyway, we all will collaborate, we'll do those changes, and then they have their show, I have mine. So that's sort of how it gets produced nowadays.
Jeff, Bill Massey here. Is there any scientific reason why the Weather Service is in that thriving metropolis known as Wakefield?
Yes, they're trying to get as few number of holes across the country as they can. So there's one outside of DC that covers, it's in Sterling, and it covers a radius of, 200 miles. Well, if ours was here, Richmond wouldn't get coverage. So they decided to move it to Wakefield so that they could get coverage up to like Richmond and actually a little north of Richmond as well, and not lose that stuff that's coming up toward DC. Where they lose a little because it's up there, if it were in Norfolk, we'd have good coverage of the Outer Banks. We have so-so coverage of the Outer Banks because that extra 40 miles or whatever it is northwest of Hampton Roads now is 40 miles we'd normally be seeing. So the other night with the tornadoes, we had a bunch of them that were hitting right around Hatteras, and Morehead City was covering, but they were just going out. When they got up toward south of Hatteras, they'd be okay. But then once they got to Hatteras, Morehead City couldn't see them. Wakefield could see them when they got north of Hatteras by about 20 or 30 miles, but couldn't see them very well at Hatteras. So they did that to try to have the gap in the coverage cover a less populated area than a more populated area.
Bill Eisenbeis, you need to unmute yourself.
Oh, somebody else had asked a question. Let me see.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Jeff, I was in the Navy on a destroyer in San Diego a few years ago, more than a few years ago, and remember having a conversation with a couple of Navy weathermen that had been stationed in Norfolk in their careers.
Right.
They were chiefs, and they told me that this area was the most difficult area as far as naval bases were concerned in the country to accurately predict the weather. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, and there have been a few studies that have shown that to be true. Every area has its idiosyncrasies. The West Coast has a little bit of a problem because there's not as good as data. There's way better than we ever had before, but we don't have as much coverage of the storms out in the middle of the Pacific as we do with the millions of land bases and the radars and whatever. So the West Coast can be difficult because of that. The East Coast, though, has more difficulty, especially here. We have the mountains, and if you get a westerly wind, it'll dry a storm out because downsloping air is drying air, compressing air. So if we get a west wind, it'll dry a storm out. If it's southwest, it doesn't have as much of an effect. If it's a due east wind, we will get some of the influence of the Gulf Stream. Whereas if it's northeast, the jet stream starts, the jet stream. The Gulf Stream sort of curves out typically. So you don't get as much of an effect of that warm Gulf Stream with a northeast wind as you do east. So just the slightest change in the position of a storm can mean a 20 or 30 degree difference in the wind, which then makes a huge difference in terms of where the rain snow line is or whether the dry air comes in or whatever. So that's the two big things, having a major influencer like the mountains being 2 hours away, which is blink of an eye in winter time, and the ocean being right here on top of us. It's just, or even little things like, this is one thing we pick up on that a lot of people don't. In the summer, when you don't have a front coming and all you have is like the regular heating of the air mass, just because of the bay and the ocean where they're 90 degrees, Shore Drive and stuff will get a north wind. Their sea breeze comes out of the north. The ocean has that sea breeze 90 degrees coming in out of the east. Well, when east and north meet, it forces the air to go somewhere, so it goes up, and just Virginia Beach will get a thunderstorm versus Hampton doesn't get it. Chesapeake, and people be like, how come it's Virginia Beach every day? And it's like, well, partly the topography. So it's a combination of the various topography and the different types of weather controlling systems that we have near us.
Jeff, we had another question about, it was given your educational experience,
Right,
knowledge,
that's what I was-
and
yeah.
okay, you see it, so you can answer.
No, for one thing now, like I said, I love it around here and I'm much too old, if I wanted to, I could already collect Social Security. So it's like, I'm not going to go anywhere else at this point. I sort of wanted to do national at one point and looked into the Weather Channel, and they tend to hire people with not much experience who are willing to work for not very much money. So you actually, like Al Roker, you can make a lot of money doing national, but if it's like a Weather Channel, which is of course where most of the national jobs are, then they simply just don't pay very well. I mean, I don't make a ton of money, but I make a nice, comfortable living, and I prefer that over chasing the big dollars and putting up with all the pressure of a big city.
Any other questions? Well, Jeff, thank you very much for joining us. This was incredibly informative. I do want to let you know that our club is a big proponent of literacy, especially for children. And in your honor, we're going to be donating a book to our School of the Week, and that is going to be going to the Mary Calcott Elementary School. So in the future, if you're there doing a presentation, feel free to drop by their library and we'll have a book in your honor in that library. So
well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you all asking me here. I recognized a few names and I know a few of you as well. So thanks to all my friends and new friends as well for having me.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you once again for joining us. Our next meeting will be next Tuesday, January 12th. We'll be starting at 12:30. We'll open the doors at 12:15 for some mingling beforehand. And our speaker will be Michael Benedetto, the president of TFC Recycling. So wish you all the best for the rest of the week and look forward to seeing everyone next week. Thanks for joining us, and we are adjourned.